accidentally discovered that my parents are lizard people. I never thought much about my parents. To me, they were always just mom and dad, a middle-aged couple living a quiet life in a sleepy suburban town. But one night, I stumbled upon something that shattered my perception of reality. It started innocuously enough. At 30 years old, I was living with my parents again after a failed relationship and a layoff at work. The house hadn't changed much since my childhood, still full of warm, comforting smells and creaking wooden floors. But something felt off lately. My parents' behavior had been strange. They were secretive, whispering to each other late at night, abruptly ending conversations whenever I entered the room. One evening, I couldn't sleep. The whispers started again, faint murmurs coming from downstairs. I tiptoed to the top of the staircase, my heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, punctuated by a low, guttural sound that I couldn't place. Curiosity overwhelmed my fear. I crept down the stairs, careful to avoid the squeaky steps, and peered into the living room. My parents weren't alone. Two figures stood with them, their elongated silhouettes casting grotesque shadows on the walls. My parents, or at least the people I thought were my parents, were shedding their skin. It sloughed off like an ill-fitting suit, revealing something horrific beneath. Their bodies glistened under the dim light, covered in green, scale-like patterns. Their eyes, now glowing and slitted like a reptile's, darted toward the figures who were handing them something. A small, pulsating object that looked disturbingly alive. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The sound was deafening in the quiet of the night. Their heads snapped toward me in unison, and for a moment, no one moved. Then my father, or whatever he was now, hissed, a sound so alien and menacing that it froze me in place. "Adam," my mother said, her voice calm but later with something I couldn't identify. "Come here." I bolted. My feet barely touched the stairs as I raced to my room, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. But the line went dead as soon as I pressed call. No signal, no Wi-Fi. The house was completely isolated. Panic set in. I barricaded the door with my desk and sat trembling in the corner, clutching a baseball bat. Hours passed in tense silence. At some point, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a restless sleep. When I woke up, the barricade was gone. My door was wide open, and the morning sunlight streamed in. Everything seemed normal to normal. My parents were in the kitchen, making breakfast, their familiar uniforms intact. They greeted me with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Sleep well?" my mother asked, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of me. I didn't answer. My mind raced, trying to reconcile what I'd seen with the mundanity of the scene before me. Were they pretending? Did they know I'd seen them? Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I had nowhere to go. Over the next few days, I began to notice more inconsistencies. My parents rarely ate. When they thought I wasn't looking, their movements were unnaturally smooth, almost predatory. And their eyes, sometimes, in certain lighting, I caught that same reptilian glint. I started to dig. I searched their room, their belongings, looking for anything that could explain what was happening. In the attic, hidden beneath a pile of old blankets, I found a leather-bound book. Its pages were filled with strange symbols drawings of creatures that looked eerily similar to what I'd seen that night. There were notes in my father's handwriting detailing something called the integration. I didn't have time to decipher it. A cold hand gripped my shoulder, and I spun around to see my mother standing there, her expression blank. "What are you doing up here, Adam?" she asked, her voice devoid of warmth. My mind blanked. "Just looking for old photos," I stammered. She didn't say anything, just stared at me for an uncomfortable moment before stepping aside. "Dinner is ready." I spent that night in my room, poring over the book. The integration, as far as I could tell, was some kind of plan to replace key figures in society with, whatever they were, lizard people. I felt ridiculous even thinking the term, but there it was, right in front of me. The diagrams, the notes, the chillingly meticulous details of how they infiltrated human lives. The next morning, I decided to leave. I packed a bag, made up some excuse about needing to visit an old friend, and walked out the front door, feigning casualness. But as I stepped onto the driveway, my father called out to me, "Where are you going?" "Just out for a bit," I replied, not turning around. "Come back inside, Adam," he said, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. I broke into a run. I didn't look back, not even when I heard the guttural hiss behind me. My car was parked down the street, and I fumbled with the keys, adrenaline making my hands clumsy. Finally, I got the engine started and sped away, glancing in the rearview mirror. My parents stood at the edge of the driveway, watching me with unblinking eyes. I drove for hours, putting as much distance between me and that house as possible. Eventually, I found a cheap motel and checked in, locking the door and shoving a chair under the knob for good measure. I spent the night going through the book, photographing every page with my phone. If anything happened to me, I wanted someone to find it, but the book raised more questions than it answered. How long had they been like this? Were they always lizard people, or had something changed them? And why were they pretending to be my parents? The next morning, I woke up to a knock on the motel door. My heart sank. I peered through the peephole, but no one was there. Slowly, I opened the door. On the ground was a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a single note. "You can't run from family. I'm still running. I've changed my name, my appearance, and moved to a different country. But no matter where I go, I can feel them watching, waiting, and I know, deep down, that one day they'll find me. After all, they're my parents, or at least